Hey, Vintage. Hello, hello, hello. Good to see you. My name is Scott. It's great to meet you if I haven't met you before. If it's your first time here, once again, welcome. We're so glad you chose to be here with us tonight. If you come here a lot, or if this is, maybe your second or third time here, we're glad you're here as well. We're glad that you chose to make this a part of your week this week here at Vintage. And I believe that God has some special things that he wants to say to each and every one of us tonight. We are in the fourth week of a series called Moments. In this series called Moments, it's our fourth and final week. And if you haven't been with us, or maybe you just need a little bit of a reminder as to where we're at, in this series, we've been looking at defining moments in our lives. Each and every one of us, as we look back on our lives, we can look at different moments and identify those moments as moments that stick out above the rest. And those moments define different parts of who we are as people and who we've chosen to be and decisions that we make. And so we've been looking at different moments and how to respond to those moments. In fact, a part of kind of the catalyst for this series was a book that I read about a year ago called The Power of Moments. This book was written by brothers Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Now, Chip is a professor at the Stanford School of Business, and his brother is a senior fellow, Dan, a senior fellow at Duke University. And so every few years they write a book together, and their most recent book is called The Power of Moments. And in this book, they were studying the science behind different moments that we have in our lives and how those moments come together and how those moments stick out above the rest. In fact, they took the moments that we all experience and they put them into four different categories: moments of elevation, moments of pride, moments of insight, and moments of connection. So, for example, a moment of elevation. Moments of elevation are moments that break the script in our lives. These moments rise above the rest. One of the things they talk about in the book is that one of the top-rated hotels in all of Los Angeles, you can look this up, is a hotel called the Magic Castle Hotel. Now, from the outside looking in, the Magic Castle Hotel does not look like anything special. It's painted canary yellow. It's 2 levels. And it was originally built in the 1950s as an apartment complex. So from the outside looking in, you'd be thinking, how could this be one of the top-rated hotels in all of Los Angeles? But what the Magic Castle Hotel does is they create an experience that elevates above the rest of the hotels in that area, or even in the country in general, some of the things that they do. They actually have a free candy bar area. And whenever you stop by, if you're staying there, you can pick up a free candy bar of your choice. They have a free DVD movie list, and you can or Blu-ray list, and you can ask for whatever movie is on there whenever you want, and you can watch it for free. They actually have a service where they will do your laundry for free and bring your laundry back to you folded in like a vacuum-sealed pack. And so it's this really great experience. In fact, here is the best part of the Magic Castle Hotel, is if you're hanging out by the pool, there's a red phone at the pool. And you can pick up the red phone because the red phone is the popsicle hotline. And you can order a popsicle of your choice: grape, orange, or cherry. And when you order this free popsicle, someone will then come out with the popsicle on a tray. And they have white gloves. And they carry out this popsicle and they deliver it to you by the pool. And so what the Magic Castle Hotel does is they create a moment of elevation, a moment that sticks out above the rest. And for many of you, you can maybe look back at an experience at a summer camp or a vacation or something in your life. It's a moment of elevation that you remember above the rest. Another example of these moments are moments of pride. Moments of pride are when we accomplish something. And you experience pride because of that moment. Maybe you received the GPA you were striving for. Or maybe you were accepted into the school that you've been wanting to go to. Or maybe you finally got that job that you've been trying so hard to get for so long, and you experience in that moment a moment of pride. The other type, moments of insight. This is when you learn something, you have an epiphany, something occurs to you, and what you've learned, a lot of times this is a faith decision, or sometimes it's a decision of something you learned about someone else, and it gives you a moment of insight, and this insight might change the trajectory of your life, the direction of your life. This moment of insight changes how you see things. And then the last one is moments of connection. And these are moments when we connect with other people. And sometimes we think moments of connection are actually just born out of fun, but they actually found that the strongest moments of connection are actually built out of times when we work with people and accomplish something with them, and we do something together. And sometimes those things can be fun, but we actually build the strongest connections when we work with one another. I know for myself, in June of 2009, almost 10 years ago now, I was 15 years old, and I had just been hired at a camp called Circle C. Some of you are familiar with it. Some of you may have even worked there or camped there before. And I was coming up from Virginia to work at this camp, and we have different work projects when camp first starts before the campers arrive. It's down in Delavan, New York, about an hour south of here. And one of the work projects that I was given was to take ceiling tiles with a group of people out of the basement of the dining hall. And when we were to take these ceiling tiles out and we were going to paint them black and then put them back into the ceiling of the dining hall, and we were going to put stars and stuff up so that people, when they were down there at night, felt like they were under a starry sky. Well, this didn't really go as smoothly as we had anticipated, and we were taking these old ceiling tiles out that had insulation connected to them, and so insulation is falling all over my face, and then rat poop starts to fall on my face from taking these ceiling tiles out, and it's hot outside because it's the summertime, and we're taking these ceiling tiles out, and we're supposed to paint them, and they're really old, and they have like insulation on them, and then there's like this white plastic, and we're painting them black, and as soon as you would paint upwards with the rolly thing, whatever you call that, I'm not a handyman, with the paint, and you roll it up, all of the white plastic would come right off of the insulation, and you're like, why are we doing this right now? And it was hot, and there's insulation. I'm itching all over. Have you ever had insulation before? Like, it's very uncomfortable, and all over me. But as much as that was kind of a miserable, why are we doing this project, it was at that moment in time that I actually met my closest friend to this day, my mentor. Many of you know him, Jay Perillo. And I met him in a moment of connection doing that work project. It actually happened that the following weekend, I didn't have anything to do. I was a 15-year-old kid from Virginia with nothing to do, and we had another moment where Jay said, hey, you want to help me move this weekend? Because he was moving from one place to another, and so I was like, sure, I'll help you move. I'm not really helpful with those things, but I'll do it anyway because you're cooler than me. And so I went, and I was with Jay, and I was this 15-year-old kid. I remember he was driving his mother's van, and I was sitting in shotgun, and I was holding this TV. It was like 55 inches, and I didn't have my seatbelt on, and I was thinking, this is the life right here. My parents would hate this if they knew that I was on the interstate holding a TV without a seatbelt. Man, if we get an accident right now, I'm going right out this window. And you're 15, you think those things are cool. But I was like, this is a moment of connection. And some of you can maybe think back to a time when you connected with somebody in such a way, and that has built a friendship that has lasted, or a relationship that has lasted for quite some time. We all have these moments of elevation, of pride, of insight, and of connection. And these are defining moments that elevate off of the pages of our lives. And as we've been going through this series, we've talked about how when we step into those types of moments of elevation, pride, insight, or connection, that we can make a mark. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the importance of seizing the moment. And last week we talked about how we can just do something, how we can move forward and we can make a decision to embrace the moment that God has placed in front of us. But one of the things that we haven't asked yet in this series is this: what do you do when a moment happens to you? What do you do when a moment happens to you? This is not something you chose. This is not something that you necessarily even wanted to happen. It just happened to you. What do you do when a moment happens to you? Because if we were to be honest, if we were to look at some of the defining moments in our lives, the ones that stick out above the rest, sometimes it's something that happened to us that we didn't necessarily want to happen to us. There's a moment of elevation that sticks out above the rest in your life, and it's not something that you really want to remember, but it broke the script of what was normal in your life, and that has started to define a lot of your decisions. Maybe your parents were separated, or maybe a friendship was broken off, and that moment elevates above the rest. Or maybe you were anticipating a moment of pride. You were anticipating that you were going to be accepted into that program. You were anticipating that you were going to get that job. You were anticipating that you were going to have the right GPA. You were anticipating a moment of pride, but what actually ended up happening was a moment of shame, a moment of disappointment, a moment of letdown. Maybe you had a moment of insight where you learned something that you didn't want to learn. You learned about something that you're like, this really actually, I didn't want to know that. There's a moment almost of self-realization or self-awareness, like in Toy Story when Buzz Lightyear learned that he couldn't fly. He jumped off the window and he lost his arm. It was a moment of insight of something he didn't want to learn, something you didn't want to learn. A moment of insight about something that you didn't even want to know about. Or a moment of connection. And this can happen in two ways. You connected with a friend, or you connected in a relationship, and you thought, this is a great friendship, this is a great relationship, but then all of a sudden, for some reason, it was disconnected. Or maybe you even connected with someone that you didn't want to connect with because of a situation of someone taking advantage of you or abuse. Because sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what do you do when a moment happens to you? What do you do? Is there any coming back? Is there any way to come back from that? Is there any way to bounce back from a circumstance like that? And here's the truth that I want all of us to see tonight. This is something that I need to constantly remind myself of, and it's something that I believe we all need to remind ourselves of, and it's this, is that God can move in any moment. God can move in any moment. Our God is good. He is gracious. He offers redemption. He offers the opportunity for us to be a new creation. And God has the power and the control to move in any moment. So what do you do when a moment happens to you? Simply put, we are going to trust that God can move in any moment. But that might be hard for us to conceptualize at first. That might be hard for us to really understand, because whatever it is that you went through or may be going through right now or will maybe go through one day in the future, it might be hard in that place to think, can God really move in this? Because I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this to happen, and it seems like the world is almost turned against me right now. Can God really move in this moment? So I want to take you to a story in ancient Israel with three guys. Their names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they were put in a place that they didn't want to be in. They were put in a place that maybe made them a little bit uncomfortable. You see, they were a part of God's chosen people, the nation of Israel. They were Jewish, but Jerusalem had been destroyed, and the Jewish people had been taken over by the Babylonians. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in Babylonian captivity. And so they were under some rules and regulations that they didn't really necessarily want to be under. They had to learn a new language. They were given new names. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not even their real names. Different educational system, different diet, all of these different things. And they had to wrestle with this question, what do you do when a moment happens to you? Because they didn't fit in. They just didn't fit in. This would be like for those of you who are Tim Hortons regulars, when you walk into Starbucks, you can feel right away the tension. I don't fit in. I don't know what to order. I don't know the size. How do the sizes work here? What's a small? What's a small? Is that a tall? Is that a small? Is that a small? How do I order? Like you feel that tension right away when you walk in, because you don't know what to do, and you want to be a Starbucks customer, but you're a college student right now, and Tim Hortons is just much cheaper, so it's an easier way to go. And so you don't know what to do, or you're like me when I was recently at Chick-fil-A, and a couple of my friends decided to bring in McDonald's sweet tea, which first of all is just disrespectful, but second of all, like we got a lot of dirty looks, because why would you bring McDonald's sweet tea into Chick-fil-A? It just doesn't make any sense, but you just don't fit in. You're like, I don't fit in. And we've all had that feeling before of, I don't fit in. This doesn't fit. This doesn't feel right. And that's where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. They were God's people. They were in the nation of Israel. They were Jewish, but they were under Babylonian rule. And so they had to see, can God really move in our moment right now? Because what had happened was the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, He built this golden statue, and he's like, hey, everyone's going to have to bow down to this statue and worship this statue. And they were probably thinking, why? We weren't asking for this. We just want to worship our God. We don't want to worship. So they decided not to, and everyone went to bow down to the statue, and they chose not to do so. So then some people in the time who had influence, we'll call them influencers, they approached the king, and they said, hey, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they decided that they didn't want to bow down. You should do something about that, King Nebuchadnezzar. And so they went to King Nebuchadnezzar, approached Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're like, hey guys, I heard you won't bow down. What's going on here? And they're like, we worship God. We're not going to bow down to this statue. We're just not going to do it. And the king had put out this decree of like, hey, if you don't worship the statue, you're going to be, thrown into the fiery furnace. And so he said, well, if you guys aren't going to do that, then I'm going to have to throw you into a fiery furnace, and you will basically die. And they probably had to be thinking a few things, like, we didn't ask to be in Babylonian captivity. We didn't ask to be in this situation to have to worship a statue. And we didn't ask to be thrown into a fiery furnace. We were just trying to worship our God. But they were in a moment, and they had to answer the question, what do you do when a moment happens to you? And they had the faith to believe that God can move in any moment. And so what I want us to do right now is take 4 principles that we find about who God is and about their perspective as to who God is, and take those 4 principles out so that we can use them as steps so that we can build our perspective to see how God can move in any moment. So the first thing I want us to see from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is this, is that God can, God will, and even if he doesn't, I am still going to believe. God can, God will, and even if he doesn't, I'm still going to believe. I took this point actually from Pastor Craig Groeschel, and it's an amazing point for something for us to adopt and to think about, to believe that in your moment of despair, in your moment of there's no turning back from this, in your moment of I don't know how I'm going to get out of this one, we need to have the faith and the perspective that God can move, God will move, and even if he doesn't move in the way in which I thought he would move, I'm still going to believe. This is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually said when they were talking to the king, and the king said, hey, I'm going to have to throw you in the furnace. Look at this up on the screen. They said, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. What do they say? Our God is able. He can deliver us from the furnace, and he will. Our God is able, our God can, our God will. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow down to this image. They had the faith to believe that God can move, God will move. But even if he doesn't, we are still going to be committed to him above all else. And in the circumstance that you are facing, in the moment that happens to you, in the moments that happen to me that I don't necessarily want to happen to me, we have to have the faith to know that God can, God will deliver us from this. But even if he doesn't do it in the way or in the timing in which we think he should do it, we are still going to believe, because we know this. He's promised us this, that our God is a good God who will work all things together for the good of those who loved him and are called according to his purposes. So as we love God and as we pursue God, he will work all things out. He can and he will. But even if he does it in the way or in the time in which I think he should do it, I'm still going to believe, because his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Here's the second thing that we see from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is that God overcomes the odds. God overcomes the odds. We all love a good underdog story. We all love watching a movie. Some of you love that movie, Rudy. I'm sorry, I really don't like that movie. I know that's like anti-American and everything, but that kid is just a whiner. He needs to keep his mouth shut. But anyways, people love it because it's an underdog story. He finally gets to play for Notre Dame at the end of the movie. Or we love movies, the underdog stories. Or we love following March Madness and seeing, a sleeper team or a team with a low seed making it far into the tournament. We love seeing upsets. We love even cheering for our friends friends when we know that they're facing something that seems impossible. We love a good underdog story, but when it comes to us overcoming an underdog situation, we so quickly lose faith. We lose perspective that God wants to move on our behalf and that God is a God who overcomes the odds. And God will always overcome the odds as we continue to pursue him. What happened was King Nebuchadnezzar was so mad, he said, hey, light the furnace 7 times hotter than what you normally light it. Light it up. Because he was unhappy with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The fire was so hot that they bound up these 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They took them to the fire. And the fire was so hot that it killed the men who were taking them to the fire. Look at how the story is recorded here. As for this reason, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The fire was so hot, it killed the men who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to the fire. And this is a perfect moment. This is a perfect setup for God to overcome the odds. This is the perfect setup for God to step into a moment that they didn't ask for, that they didn't want to happen, that they probably could have been asking some questions. Why now? Why now? Why now? And God is about to move in this moment in a powerful way because God overcomes the odds. And your life might be going in a direction right now where you're thinking, you're not heading towards a literal fire, but you're thinking things are about to explode, things are about to burn up, things are bad. You might be in the middle of that right now. And our God is a God who's a deliverer. He's a provider. He will see us through as we trust in him, and he always overcomes the odds. That's why we should always go for pursuing his plan above pursuing our own solutions. Here's a third thing we see, is that God feels the fire with you. He feels the fire with you. He's present. He's there. Jesus took on all of our sin and our pain at the cross. And God feels the fire with you. See, Nebuchadnezzar goes over to look at the fire, to see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, expecting that, they've burned to death. And then he notices something. He sees, they're walking around, and there's a 4th man walking around in the fire with them. Look at this. It's crazy. He said, look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Now, some people will say, a lot of scholars will actually say that this is probably an appearance of Christ years before Christ ever even stepped onto the pages of human history, and that he met them in the fire, and they were untouched. And whatever moment you might face when you say, what do you do when a moment happens to you? You can trust that God is there with you. So I imagine that God showed up in that fire. We're like, hey, it's a little warm in here, fellas. I imagine showing up like the genie in the Cave of Wonders, singing "You Ain't Never Had a Friend Like Me," you know what I mean? And hey, we're gonna take care of this, and then snapping his fingers. Hey guys, let's put on some swim trunks and drink some lemonade. It's a little warm in here. Let's just relax right now. Let's just relax. And they're walking around in the fire untouched. Yeah, guys, we might break a sweat. It's gonna be okay. It's a little hot, but we're good. And whatever moment it is that you might feel is defining you, God is not standing off at a distance saying, "Go figure it out yourself." No, he stepped into it. God stepped into human history when he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross for you and for me. And he took on our pain and our sin and our guilt. And so not only does he feel it, he then wants to protect us from it. He wants to protect us from whatever moment it is we are allowing to define us or hurt us. And so God feels the fire with you. He is there with you. He's not standing off at a distance saying, "Figure it out yourself." He's saying, "I'm there. I am present. I want to move in this moment with you." And as you begin to allow God to move in your life in that way, as you trust that God can and God will, but even if he doesn't, I'm still going to believe. When you can trust that God is able to overcome the odds, when you know that God feels the fire with you, Even when you don't have the answers to all of your questions and it feels like things are about to come crumbling down. But you allow God to move in you even in those darkest of moments or even in those most confusing of moments. You will see this, that God moves through you so that he can move through others. God moves through you so he can move through others. Here's the true power of the moments that we've been talking about over the past 4 weeks, whether it's a moment you choose or whether it's a moment that happens to you. This is an opportunity not just for God to move in you, but this is an opportunity for God to move through you. And as God moves through you, as you begin to trust in him and have faith in him, in his goodness, in his redemption, in his love, in his grace, in his mercy, as you allow God to move through you, he'll begin to move through others. See, King Nebuchadnezzar, whose heart was hard towards God, who it seemed like this guy really wanted nothing to do with God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came parading out of the fiery furnace. They didn't smell like fire. There were no marks on them. They came out clean. They came out brand new. They were ready to go. And the power of God moving through them then began to inspire Nebuchadnezzar, and God began to move through his heart. Look at what King Nebuchadnezzar says here. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." He said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people," now before I read this decree, just a reminder here, Nebuchadnezzar is a bit of a dramatic person. He threw some people in a furnace for not, worshiping a statue. And if you read all of the book of Daniel, you'll see that he's fairly dramatic in a lot of his reactions to things. So what he's about to say is not necessarily representative of the heart of God. It's representative of a dramatic king who's probably very high in testosterone right now and wondering what's going on. He says, "Because therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb." So you see, that's a little dramatic. But anyways, "and their house is reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way." Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. As God moved through them, he began to move through the king. He said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." And in your moment, when you're wondering, can God move in this moment? As you give it to him, God will begin to move through you as well. You see, I know this to be true not just from this story, but from my life as well. I started at the beginning of this message talking about a moment of connection in June of 2009 when I met Jay and connected with him and built a lifelong friendship with him. But one of the main reasons that moment of connection occurred was because a moment of elevation that you could almost describe as a moment of tragedy that occurred in my life just a month before. See, I grew up going to this camp, Circle C, and God changed my life there. It's where I gave my life to Christ. And when I was working at Circle C, there's these different counselors there, and when you're a camper, these counselors are the coolest people in the world. They're like superheroes or movie stars to you. It's kind of weird because it's just at this camp. You're like, these people are so cool. And then you find out that you're just everyday people, but they're so cool to you. And one of the counselors, who's the coolest person in the world to me, his name was Mike Cooper. And I just thought he was amazing because as a young boy, he did everything that you weren't supposed to do, but as a boy, you're like, that's the coolest thing in the world. Like, he would chug pots of coffee, and he would scream and yell and jump around like a maniac and eat insane amounts of food. Like, there was this time that he told me a story of when he went and bought a bunch of Burger King cheeseburgers and stuffed them in his drawer at Circle C and just ate them throughout the week. Now, that sounds disgusting now, but as a kid, you're like, that's so cool. This guy ate burgers. He has a stomach of armor, and he throws up and things. You're like, that's cool as a kid. And anyways, he not only was he cool, but he'd had a tremendous impact on my life because of how God had moved in his life. And in April of 2009, he was actually taking a break from work, and he came and visited me at my home in Virginia and stayed with my family for about a week. And we just hung out the entire time, talked about how God was moving in our lives, but just had a ton of fun. We played a bunch of Super Mario with my little brother because they were both obsessed with it. And it was a really good time. And I was really looking forward to finally getting to work at Circle C with him. Not only because of how much fun I knew I was going to have with him, but because of how closely he walked with Christ, and I wanted to learn from him. I wanted him to be my mentor, and I wanted to spend a lot of time with him that summer. Well, he'd visited us in April of 2009, and just a month later, in May of 2009, I received a phone call from a counselor of mine at Circle C. And it turned out that on this day, in May of 2009, Mike Cooper was out reading his Bible in Devil's Hole out in Niagara Falls. Some of you are familiar with that area. And he had walked off the trail. And in reading his Bible and walking off the trail, he had lost his footing, and he fell in the gorge and passed away. It was tragic, and I was shook, and I thought, what's going to happen now? I'm 15. And I am going away 7 hours away to this camp, and I don't know if I'm going to have any friends. I was just going to hang out with Mike Cooper and his friends all summer and learn from him, and I don't know what God's plan could be for me now this summer because I'm going to kind of be all alone trying to get to know people. And as tragic as that was for me, and as difficult as that was for me to go through, I just followed God's call to go up to camp, and in that's when I then had that moment of connection and met my lifelong friend, Jay. Now, I still could have met Jay if Coop would have worked that summer, but I may not have been as close to him as I am now. And God took that moment of elevation and tragedy, and I said, God, I'm still going to allow you to work in my life. I'm still going to pursue you, even though this doesn't make sense to me right now. And God began to move in that moment because he works all things to the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And God began to move. And then I was given a friendship, a relationship, a mentorship that I may not have had if that wouldn't have happened. And it wasn't the most ideal situation, it wasn't the best situation. It was a very difficult thing for so many people to go through because Mike Cooper had such great influence in so many people's lives. But through that, God used that moment to change so many other people's lives, including my own. Why is that? Because God can move in any moment. God will move in the moment. But even if he doesn't do it in the way I think he should, I'm still going to believe. Because our God, he always overcomes the odds. And God, he is in the fire with you. He can feel the fire with you, and he wants to protect you from it and deliver you through it, because when God moves through you, he begins to move through others. And as we allow him to do that, we will see the truth. And the reality of the situation is this, is that God can move in any moment. He can move in all of your moments. He can move in my moments. So what do you do when a moment happens to you? We trust in God because he is in control of all, and he can move in any moment. If you would, please bow your heads and join me in prayer. Jesus, thank you for all that you've given us. Thank you for your power. Thank you for your love. And thank you for your ability to redeem and move in any moment. Some of you here tonight who are following Christ, it's about giving that moment to him. That's something that happened to you, and allowing him in on that moment, allowing him to reshape it and make it new. But some of you are here tonight, and you've never stepped into a relationship with Jesus. And you look at your life, and you wonder sometimes, is there purpose, is there meaning? In the moments of your life, you're wondering, what does this all mean, and what is this all for? Well, there was a moment that happened in history that rises above all other moments, and this is when Jesus died on the cross for you. Then he rose from the grave so that you could have new life, because he has created you with a plan and a purpose in mind. And when you walk in relationship with Jesus and in the life that he has for you, there's redemption in every moment, and there's purpose in all the moments that he allows you to step into. So some of you are here tonight, and there's a void in your heart because you haven't stepped into a relationship with Jesus, and I want to give you that opportunity to do so. If you haven't stepped into a relationship with Christ, I'm going to invite you to pray a prayer along with me. You don't have to say it out loud, just say it in your heart, somebody did this for me once, and I want to do this for you. Just pray these words in your heart. Jesus, I turn from my sin. I surrender my life to you. Thank you for coming and dying for me. Thank you for coming back from the grave so I can have new life. Jesus, come into my heart. Make me new. I give my life to you. If you're here tonight and you prayed to give your life to Christ, I'm going to ask you to do something very bold right now, but I want to pray for you. It's the only way I know how to do this, and I want to pray for you. And if you gave your life to Christ, nobody else looking around, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and look me in the eye right now. I want to pray for you. I see you. Keep your hand up for just a minute. I want to pray for you. See you. See you. Anyone else? Anyone else? I want to pray for you. I'm going to pray for both of you right now. Keep your hands up and look at me right now. I want to pray for you. And Jesus, I pray for these. Continue to show them the life that you have for them. May they continue to walk in the freedom of the forgiveness that you've given them. Thank you for what you're doing in their hearts right now. Continue to change them and lead them into the new life that you have for them. All right, everyone, heads down, eyes closed. You keep your hands up. It's the only way I know to do this. I'm not getting you to sign up for anything. I have some people who want to explain to you about the prayer that you just prayed. If someone came with you, you can bring them with you. But if you can just step out right now, they'd love to take you out right there. And you can head out with them because it's going to get loud in here in a minute, and they want to be able to explain some things to you. The rest of us, let's close out in prayer right now. Jesus, thank you for those who are stepping into new life with you. Thank you for what you're doing in each and every one of our hearts. May we trust in you. May we walk closely with you and know that you can move in any moment, no matter the circumstance. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your grace. May we continue to trust in you in all that we do. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thanks for watching this episode of Vintage. If God spoke to you through this talk, please click on the button titled, How Do I Follow Jesus, on our website, and feel free to contact us and let us know what God is doing in your life. Thanks again for watching.